Hi guys, Tony Lacey from the Lacey's Ranch. Thanks for coming back to layer of the Vintage Rifles Shooters Club. Guys, today very cool video. We're going to talk about advancement and progress for semi-automatic sniper rifles. How the whole thing started, how the concept evolved and progressed over the years, and we'll travel across the world. So buckle up and let's roll with it. Tony, so SVT, Soviet Russia, and ironically, guys, as you may know, the Russian-Soviet sniper program was sparked by the Germans, and the Soviets cut that ball really tightly and ran with it without ever looking back.
Yep.
Say what you want about the Soviets, but they fully embraced the sniper program. So of course they started with PM, basically bolt action, still most in the guns, modified to heavy scopes. But from the very early time, Russians were obsessed with semi-automatic sniper weapon. You gotta give it to them, really. And the SVT, I think mid-30s to like late 30s, the work on the SVT started. Unfortunately, I think this rifle was way ahead of its time.
What the 38? Of course, you know, of course they had the AVS 36, and then they went to the SVT 38. Of course, this is the SVT 40. But the development of it, of course, politics, as anything in military procurement.
Even in Soviet Union.
Even in communist land. But, you know, I still think it's a fine rifle.
Well, the SVTs were facing battle on the two fronts. So the one was they had tremendous problems with keeping the manufacturing quality in check. And that was the issue. That was the real deal that was happening. I think I read at one instance, like over 91% parts were rejected because of the quality. So that was the one issue. And you have to understand at that time, it was hard, really hard to get the machining of that type of the level and the tolerances on the semi-automatic. This is much more complicated rifle itself than the bolt action.
Yes, and probably cost them what? I bet it was triple what a Mosin gun would cost.
Absolutely. Compared to the Mosin, that's not even a question. But the second problem was really the troops were not trained well on what the SVT can do for them. And that was issue on itself. So the rifle never really, how I should form this, the rifle never really did what it could do on the battlefield for the multiple reasons. But this would be, I mean, in my eyes, from semi-automatic sniper perspective, this was the grandfather for things to come forward. And as I said, probably because of the timing, and then of course when the World War II started, and this was their pretty much at that time, they committed themselves to their sniper, and that of course changed as the war progressed because they couldn't produce it, that type of the rifle, and the quality issues and accuracy issues which SVT was plagued with, and the decision was made to stick to the PU snipers.
Hitler got in their decision-making cycle, didn't he?
That's, big time, big time. But the truth is, this would be like, I see this as a starting point.
And without the SVT, we never would have had the PU type scope. The
PU scopes, they replaced the PEM scopes, and this was the simplified version, 3x power, and you still have the ability to load the magazine with the cartridges. So I think still from history perspective and what that rifle could do, it was amazing. It was the huge leap forward, and it was the new approach to the sniping game.
and probably like we'll talk about with the Grand, they never could get these to hold to the same standard that the bolt actions would do, but the SVT locks up a lot like the Grands, and I think that was the issue, because to get this one to shoot anything close to like I needed to, I had to shim the action into the stock to keep it from shifting every time. But now I got it. Now I got a small little issue with the scope, but we'll get that going. But
it's still
it's there, yeah.
It's a fun rifle to shoot.
And one day we will see this on the Aniston.
Oh, there we go. Now we're talking. Challenge accepted. Now, Tony, after the Soviet Russia, the Germans started paying attention to the semi-automatic sniper game, and boom,
here we go. Copied the scope.
Pretty much, yes. It's slightly different, but the idea, well, the whole thing consistent. They used the SVT, and the Germans were never admit that they were impressed with something other than the German stuff, but you can see there was a lot of elements which they refined and borrowed from it.
Of course, with the pistons running, that's a direct development from the G41 to the G43, and this SVT made this what it is. Now, the action is different, but the development of this rifle was in direct response to that SVT.
Absolutely. Again, the Germans seen the value of switching or going or embracing the semi-automatic sniping idea, and especially because of how the Europe cities are set up and how the fighting was happening. Yes, you had the wide open fronts, but then you had those dense urban populations, and the fighting was happening inside the cities. This was a huge advantage. The one thing I want to point out, there was a lot of hesitance across the armies to go to the semi-automatic, Tony, because what is happening with the semi-automatic cartridge? It's the empty shell is getting kicked out. So for the snipers, from the sniper's perspective, it's like, holy cow, now I have to deal with that brass which is flying out, and that could be a target indicator for other guy on the opposite end, because you're creating that unwanted motion. There's something happening.
Counter snipers.
Counter snipers. If in heavily contested ground, that is always problematic when you start spitting the brass all over the places, right? So that's something what people were put. The thought process was like, we gotta be careful how we're going with it. But then if you will put all the negatives and positives on the scale, I think balance was tipping towards the semi-automatic rifle. And accuracy issue was always there. Like at that time, these are not M110s, right? Today's M110s, but so they could not really keep up with the bolt action counterparts, but it was enough to put the bodies to the bag. And I would say you got more experience with this rifle. You've 500 meters, 550 yards, you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I feel comfortable with this at a human-sized target. This will whack you. We shot it out to 600 several times. I've used it in a competition. I don't shoot it a whole lot because, like I said, it is in super condition and matching and everything else. You know, you don't want to run it like I would some of my Grands and stuff, but it does have a shooter's kit on it, so I can shoot it because they are way overgassed. If you leave all the original stuff on there, it'll throw a shell.
Next zip code.
Yeah, you think that PSL throws one? This will toss it out there pretty good. But I do shoot it. It has done well, and I would take it anywhere. And to me, with the stock, it is you got screws down here, so it's screwed into the stock. it tends to do better than my Garands.
The Garands.
Now, a Garand with a proper fitting stock, shoot with it all day.
Shoot the lights out.
Yeah, but this right here will do it. Now, the ZF4 scope, I think the PU runs circles around the scope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it is cheaply made, I guess. Yeah. And I think Mike and some of them talk about it. Their internals are just not as strong as what.
Well, and again, this time instead of Hitler interfering with the Soviets' developments, the Soviets were returning the favor and interfering, and the materials were getting harder and harder for the Germans to get. So the quality of some production was not what you would expect from the typical German product.
Glass is pretty good.
Glass, well, they stayed with the glass quality to the end of the war. That was not the problem. The problem was with the metals, which they were using for the reticles and stuff. But on the Allied sides, interestingly enough, and we will coin the sidestep for a second, but with the reticles, do you remember what happened on the, I think Canadians had the issues with the reticles for their long range number 4T sniper. They couldn't get the reticles, so they ordered needles from the Great Britain because they used the needle as a tip for the reticle. It is a crazy story, but so sewing needle was used as a front post. Not the front, but as a post on the reticle. Yeah. So, but this just shows you that those shortages of the materials, they were affecting everyone. But as war progressed, of course, the Germans were more and more on the receiving end, and that's why the internals in some of the scopes are not what you would expect.
And I would say when the G41 came out, which had the Bang type gas system on it, if they could have reached this in 41 opposed to 43, I think it probably would have made a huge difference with them.
Absolutely. And that's this is one of the gotchas of the history. What if, right? Yeah. But you could see where the scale was shifting and the progressing and what the process thought was. Now let's jump to the U.S. Army or to the U.S. Armed Forces. Yeah. So M1c, Tony, and the M1c Garand for 1944, you would say the maybe a little bit earlier the work started, but the Americans, we were paying attention to what's going on as well. And of course, Garand, fantastic infantry weapon. Now,
the best out there, I'd say.
From World War II, from semi-automatic, there was no competition. You can talk about the SVT, but it was not even close. The way how this rifle handles and moves, and it's extremely reliable too. But we sidetracking. So let's go back to the M1c. So M1c, very cool development, and right off the bat, the people knew we have to put the scope on it, and we have to be competitive on the battlefield. So 1944, work started. 2 mounts were kind of progressing, and the M1c type you see with the levers. And Tony, you pronounce this better. What's the name of that company which makes the Hoey?
Griffin and Howe.
Griffin. I will butcher that. Tony is better with English. And then the M1d Mount, which was designed by Mr. Garand himself. And this is the M1d Mount, so you can see the simplicity is just the one thumbnail screw. And unfortunately, it wasn't either because of the stupid politicians, politics involved, money had to change hands. Nobody really knows how that happened, but the Garand design mount didn't make the cut for the first M1c.
Yeah, Griffin and Howe probably had a senator or a representative really pulling for them. Of course, they're New York, and the company's still around today. And honestly, myself, I like that mount. I like that. This one right here, at least you almost got to take something to tighten it down.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is just 2 little levers.
But the level, Tony, to be honest with you, I shot a lot M1C, and you gotta pay attention with those levers too. They will start moving from recoil. So probably a Loctite the screws on them and put that torque too to torque them all down. So and the same for M1d mount. You almost have to put the Loctite on that screw and then use the you know, like a, I don't know, channel lock to tie it down. But the M1d mount works great too. Either way, point is, M1C popped to the scene because of the several delays, politics, whatever, what was happening. It started shipping at the end of the World War II. It was, I think it made it, the M1Cs made it to Europe, to Italy for sure, because we've seen the pictures, that famous picture with the guy posing with it. But I don't think there is a documented history of combat in Europe for the M1C.
And they say it made it to the Pacific too, but once again, I don't.
From all the books I have seen, the only possibility I could see this Philippines. And in Philippines, at the very end, we're literally talking about when they arrived and the end of the war, the last forces surrounding in August, just like I did in the video, World at War in Philippines. That would be the only scenario where I can see that rifle be used in combat or in Pacific.
And the Springfield's issue with these is getting them to shoot to something what you would expect just a little bit better than the average Garand.
Well, they use a vetting process from my understanding, so the rifles were chosen for the accuracy. Now, there were complications done because of the mount. They had to shape the receivers, then there was a heat treatment issue. So this is a whole can of worms which happened because the mount was, they had to drill 5 holes in the receiver, and because of that was all shipped to the Griffin, and they had to do their work, and then they were shipping. There was like 150 miles distance between two companies.
Untreated receivers.
Complete insanity, but of course that created the issues which were discovered later on. Oh, we got a problem with the heat treatment issues, and the equipment is not performing as it should. To that, but that was a great call, because to that thing, they couldn't really test the rifles
until it was done.
So where the M1d mount allowed to have any Garand, like if you want to go with the original the Garand the mount, they could put it on any type of the rifle. So and everything was controlled inside the Springfield Armory because the manufacturing process was done there. So
theoretically, they could have took a good shooting Garand, then turned that barrel down to take the mount. Now they ended up not doing that. They just made the barrels. But
well, because at that time, when the M1C started, and after we transitioned to M1D, we were in totally different bucket. The World War II ended, but we were approaching Korea. And the Korean War, and the M1Ds really, they were used in the Korean War with different flavors for the scopes, of course, but the final M84 scope, correct me if I'm wrong, end up on the Garands, and the M84 scope.
If it got to Korea, it was at the very, very end. M82s and.
The M82, but the M84, what I'm saying, was like the final
the
progression for the...
We're forgetting one though.
Oh, the
4-power.
Cole Morgan.
Cole
Morgan. Well, that's a different kind of worms. You actually had the chance to shoot. I did not have a chance to shoot the Cole Morgan. How is it shooting around with that 4-power scope?
It makes quite a bit of difference with it. And the Cole Morgan has the big turrets, sort of like what we're used to nowadays, instead of the little bitty turrets like these two have. And it's got the much bigger field of view. It's basically Smith Morgan turned into Redfield.
Yes.
So if you're familiar with Redfield, that's that 4-power Redfield with the turret on it.
That was a big, I think that was a step in the right direction, because really those 2.2, 2.5 power scopes, they were not cutting it. You could extend the ranges on those rifles by using a better glass. Like honestly. But that being said, the World War II was winding down. Before the Korea kicked out, we forgot to talk about one more rifle, which is not on the table and it's impossible to get it. The Soviets actually, they were still pushing forward with semi-automatic sniper. So they tried to make a sniper rifle from SKS. And the prototypes were made, the tests were conducted. The issue with the SKS was, I wouldn't say it was so much issue with the accuracy of the rifle, but the quality of the 7.62 by 39 ammo was horrible at that time. And they basically, test results were unsatisfactory. And they said, nope, we're pulling the plug. This is not going forward. There's no point to waste the money. PU sniper will stay till we'll come up with something else.
And that's something.
And that something else, this is a clone of the SVD, but that something else was basically the SVD rifle. And we're talking about the early 60s, early 60s. Interestingly enough, this is of course the PSO reticle scope, but before that, the early examples were with the PU scope. So that PU scope had extended life from the SVT through the PU to even the beginnings of the SVD. And at that time, and I said this numerous times, at that time when the SVD package, and by package I mean rifle and the scope, was released, it was an absolutely game changer. What the Soviets did, again, you gotta give them a credit. What they did, they pushed the goalpost forward, and the ball never left their hands. They knew what they want. They were, during the World War II or right after the war, they were kind of held back by technology or gap, but finally everything caught up. The scope was developed and a fantastic reticle inside the scope, very good 4-power scopes with the good glass, and the features which were included in the scope were absolutely jaw-dropping, and rifle itself was an absolutely amazing piece of the hardware. And right here, I want to add something, because people are often saying, well, you know, the accuracy of the SVD, they start opening after the 20 shots, or, you know, when they hit up. Like, you gotta understand, this rifle was not designed to keep putting, you know, your paper target groups, 20 shots, you know, 9, 10 shots. I don't care. This was not the thought process behind that rifle. When the Dragunov started working on it, his goal was put 3 shots into the same hole. And at the first cold bowling, whatever you want to call that, and that's it. And you have to understand too, the sniper doctrine is you don't make more than between 1 to 3 shots. 3 shots is in the books today, but that's like really pushing. If you read actually the encounters from the war zones, especially from the heavily contested areas, 1 shot and you were done.
Near peer competitors.
Absolutely. So nobody was dumping rounds and then complaining, well, I'm stringing up, you know? So it was 1 to 3 shots and you're done, you're moving, rifle is cooling off. Now, you may have the situations when you are in that urban environment and the targets are exposing himself and you got the backing of the squad behind you, or you're in that defensive role and you don't care that much about the concealment. So then you need the higher rate of fire. But at that point too, you have to remember your distance are shrinking. So even if you start stringing up, hey, inside 300 meters, 330 yards, I can guarantee you, you will knock out.
Connect.
You will connect on the human-sized torso with this rifle, and I don't care about your string. Like, you will keep dropping the bodies down.
And probably, right, this is a good time to talk about it. The concept of the SVD, you know, the Soviets have a different view of the sniper. This is really a squad guy, a DMR, sure. What we call DMR now. So these guys are just trying to close the gap.
Absolutely, between the infantrymen, and they want to control that field to the extended ranges. And the SVD did fantastic job and is doing, still doing, and still putting the people to sleep all across the world.
If you look at videos from the war in Syria, wars in Iraq, Ukraine.
Syria is absolutely insane because you see them on each side of the conflict too. Like everyone is using the SVD. Ukraine the same. You know, like they're high speed units in operating from. I'm not going to say the country. We don't want to scare any controversy, but in Ukraine. And they have a little bit different equipment, but they're classic, you know, units in the SVD. Of course, a little bit dressed up differently because the SVD progressed to the transformations and everything, polymers and things like this. They are still operating, and the same on the Ukrainian side. So the SVD game changer. Like really, like this was the I would say at that time, at that point. The early 60s and the 1963, I think, fielding started. This was like the crown achievement from all this side of the table, right? All this side of the table. That was like, boom, we have arrived.